We're so happy to be here with the members of Willow Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, and we're eager to hear their successes, their challenges, and the lessons that they've learned in efforts to make land and commercial spaces collectively owned and permanently affordable in Western Massachusetts. This event is part of a series of public conversations hosted by Collective Diaspora, profiling Black cooperatives throughout the African diaspora. English, Spanish, Portuguese interpretation is provided by the Afro-Resistance Language Justice League. Our plan for our learning tonight is that we'll begin with a fellow steering committee member, that's Mike Strode, sharing an overview of Collective Diaspora. We'll then hear from members of Willow, and following their presentation, we'll be posing some questions for them, and we'll also invite questions from all of you. We encourage you to use the chat for questions and comments. Welcome, everyone.
I think we're pivoting to Danielle, but I'm just here for the comic relief. That's what I do.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Danielle Mcauley, and I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm a steering committee member of the Collective Diaspora. Happy to be here with you all tonight. I'm just going to share a little bit of information and history about Collective Diaspora. Collective Diaspora is a global co-op of Black co-ops and support groups. We are a membership-based organization of Black cooperatives and Black-led cooperative support organizations from across the African diaspora. Basically, we are connecting the global Black solidarity economy. Our mission is to build a regenerative economy grounded in racial and gender equity through the development and growth of Black cooperatives around the world. It is widely recognized that a major part of the massive wealth that exists today in this globalized capitalist economy was built on the kidnapping and exploitation of African people during the transatlantic slave trade on through colonialism and neo-colonialism in the present day. This is what Colombia's new and first Black Vice President, Francia Marquez, has referred to as an economic model of death. All of us that are building cooperatives are part of an economic model of life, and we need each other, especially in Black communities. That's why we are calling together all those elements in Black communities across the diaspora that are grounded in the cooperative traditions of collective ownership and collective work that kept our ancestors alive and that we carry with us today. By deepening our connections with each other, we aim to make our cooperatives and organizations, and in turn our communities, stronger and more resilient. Last year, we came together and did a lot of internal work to build a democratic structure. We are carrying that work into this new year and aim to soon begin taking on new members. We are taking on new members now. Our steering committee from the US, Canada, and the Caribbean have settled on 4 pillars of work throughout this year. Number 1, growing resources for Black cooperatives. 2, develop education and training opportunities for Black cooperatives. 3, mapping the global Black co-op ecosystem. 4, deepening relationships among Black cooperators. If you want to get involved, whether it's through having your co-op or organization join, or donating, or sharing some other resource to help us meet these goals, then please take a moment to visit our website and fill out the sign-up form. Thank you all.
And this is where we turn it over to Trenda and with the rest of Willow. So I'll jump in here. So we're now blessed to have with us an incredible new co-op that has come up that we were excited to learn about. and this is Willow Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. And they're doing the incredible work that is really necessary to challenge capitalism up front and really question the fundamental meanings of what does it mean to own land and how do we do it. So we're really excited to have the members of Willow Permanent Real Estate Cooperative here with us. We've got Trenda Lofton, Sana, and Kasi. Did I say that right or wrong? Wrong. I just jacked it. I had it right earlier.
Wrong. No, it's cachet.
Cachet. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So we will turn it over to you all. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Trenda Lofton. I am the founder and director of Willow and get the deep honor to be in partnership and collaboration with Cachet and Sana. I will pause there, let them get their voices in the room, and then I'll take it back to land us in the space a little bit together.
Hi, I'm Sana Caradwin. I've been working with Trenda and Cachet on Willow for a little over a year now, and I'm excited to share what we've been doing with you.
Good evening. I am Cachet Spellman Timmons, pronouns they, them. I am actually based in Philly, but am in Western Massachusetts monthly. And I have been working with Sana and Trenda on Willow for a while now. So I'm excited to be here to share what we have been up to and also to hear from you all what questions you might have. So thank you.
Amazing. I want to do something that is for me, but perhaps will benefit all of you. So I just want to take a moment to feel into our bodies, to land energetically in this Zoom space in the room that you are in. So if you like doing things like having your feet on the floor and feeling your feet on your floor, or really feeling wherever your body is in contact with another surface, and take a moment just to notice your breath. Notice any places of tension. What a beautiful thing you've got going on here. I was so excited to hear about the work that Collective Diaspora is up to, and to have the opportunity to share what we are dreaming into reality, kind of running into, and also like feeling what happens when we slow down. So tonight you're going to hear a little bit of the journey of our becoming. You'll hear, as was mentioned, a little bit of some of the struggles that we've run up against, and we'll let you know what we're up to now. Just a quick show of hands or emojis. How many of you have heard of a permanent real estate cooperative? Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you. So we're not going to spend tons of time going into the details of what is a permanent real estate cooperative, but we do want to give just a brief little introduction to it. So I'm going to try to be clever and share my screen. I thank you in advance for your patience. And forgive me, but I'm actually going to leave it in this mode because I need to see your faces. So you already know who we are, so we'll pass that. So we really, the PREC model, or the permanent real estate co-op model, comes from a really Willow inspiration, which is East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, based in Oakland, California. They've been up and running for about, I think, 8 or 9 years. So they are more seasoned and deep in the work, which is absolutely incredible. And they partnered with the Sustainable Economies Law Center to develop this model. We really consider it as a movement cooperative. We know that it really tackles many of the core issues around how do we want to co-own together? How do we make housing and commercial spaces not extractive, right? So not so expensive that people can't participate. It's really a structure for holding land and homes that allows it to maintain that affordability in the long term. And for us and for EB-PREC, it's a multi-stakeholder cooperative, which we'll talk a little bit more about a little later. To say just really briefly, it's, there are more than one type of owners. So you may have heard of worker co-ops or housing co-ops. For us, there are staff owners. So right now, that's me, Sana, and Cache. There are resident owners and there are community owners. And those are really the folks with the most amount of decision-making power, which we'll talk a little bit more about later as well. And it's about that commitment to permanently remove land and homes from the speculative market. So when we buy things, when we buy homes or land or commercial buildings, it is not for the intention of selling it again when the market is hot or it's a seller's market and we can make a lot of profit on it. We really are looking to keep anything we ever purchase within a network so that we can maintain that commitment to affordability. I want to pause there for a moment. Sana or Cache, anything you want to add on this slide? Okay, perfect. So this talks a little bit about how things operate. I'm going to zoom past this a little bit because we talked about, we'll share different slides for this. But each member category, so resident owner, staff owner, and community owner, has a set of decision-making powers that are particular for them, and then also in service of the overall co-op. So there is a board of directors that we are cultivating and building out now. As with many new co-ops, the three of us are the board of directors currently, though that will be changing and we're looking forward to that. The ownership remains with the co-op as opposed to with any individual group or individual. So that's one of the things that's really unique about this model, is that the building of equity is really happening through your ownership in the co-op itself. Anything y'all want to add to that? Okay, perfect. So how did Willow-PREC begin? Year one was really anchoring in the vision. Now, I think I mentioned that Willow-PREC has been in development for about 3 years. We've gotten to do some things really quickly and are moving more slowly on the things that just take more time. So year one was about developing a core team. They are actually the original residents of soon to be Willow-PREC owned buildings. And so talking and thinking about what are our needs and what are our hopes. Part of what came out of that, maybe I'll stop sharing for just a moment. This is a little bit more storied. So originally, it came out of my desire and a couple other folks' desire to run a healing retreat center. And we knew that for Black folks, for queer, Black, and brown folks, that access to space for healing, we just didn't have a whole lot of that for us to really come together and be intentional about it. So we started dreaming into that and came into relationship with someone who is looking to redistribute their wealth. It was inherited / stolen wealth. They were looking for opportunities to transform that. So wanting to invest in Black cooperatives, wanting to do reparations, right? And so we had the opportunity. They were here for this healing retreat center, right? So as we started talking and thinking together about our dreams, our hopes, our needs, we realized that we were really interested in figuring out ways to make this one-time investment benefit more than just us, right? Because we had this one connection. And so we started thinking about, what do other people do that own stuff, that own buildings, that own land, and they mobilize that resource, right? They leverage that asset to purchase other assets. So getting loans based on a building that they already own. So we realized that that could be a strategy we could use, right? Is with this initial investment, it could allow us to leverage it, to do it again and again and again, to meet more of our collective needs. So we started doing research, and then that's when we came across East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, and decided to develop our own, and what would work for us, what would work in our community. And it's been an extraordinary process so far. I want to pause there for just a moment, as I look at my notes, full transparency. Yes, I feel like that kind of completes the how do we get started. We learned that the PREC model was the right model for us, because we wanted the flexibility that being a cooperative business would allow us. We looked at things like community land trust models, which we think are amazing. And there are a lot of restrictions that come with that, right? And so as we did our digging, it ultimately, we landed on the PREC model as the one to keep exploring. So I want to pause there, toss it to Cache, who's going to lead us in talking a little bit more about what does democratic control look like for us at Willow PREC currently and in the future. Would you mind starting us talking about the resident owners?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think something before moving into that I want to make sure that I address is that while Willow Permanent Real Estate Cooperative and EB PREC have chosen to do the PREC model, I think it's important to note that other models are accessible under the umbrella of the cooperative. So there may be LLCs that the cooperative owns. There may be an ability to look into a group who wants to do a land trust and put it in Willow Permanent Real Estate Cooperative stewardship, right? So the one of the like Trenda touched on, one of the biggest flexibility pieces with this model is that it allows you to not just be stuck in this one model. And as we know, all of the communities that we come from have different needs. And so because of that, that might be a really, it's a really good opportunity to dream about what are all the things possible underneath the PREC model. So moving into the democratically controlled pieces, one of the ownership categories that you heard was resident owners. So resident owners are folks that will live in Willow PREC properties, steward Willow PREC land. They may, because Willow PREC is not just residential, but also commercial ownership possibility, then it may be folks who, you may have a doctor's office that you want your doctor's office under or owned by Willow PREC. It could be daycare centers. It could be just anything that the community needs. And so as such, if you are considered a resident to some capacity, and you go through your resident ownership, then you would be a resident owner. And part of this is that each individual property gets to make their independent decisions. So it's essentially like you are managing your own property. That's the goal and the intention. Willow Prec does not aim to serve as property managers. So we want to be clear about that. That's not the goal. The preference and the goal would be for all residents to take stewardship over the property that they are either living in, working in, or land that they may be stewarding. I think resident owner class also has elected reps to the board. And then there's opportunities for engagement and leadership. Many of this is in progress because we're still assessing, what are those opportunities? What does that engagement look like? Perfect example, Trenda just shared about, the possibility of retreat space. So what is the balance between folks who may be living and regularly stewarding a property versus the accessibility to community? Yes, I think that's it for the resident owner piece. So I'll pass it over to either Sana or Trenda to take over the other ones. But before I do, are there anything you want to add, Trenda or Sana, to that piece?
I can add, and this will show up in each of the membership classes. When it comes to decision making, we really want to move with consensus when at all possible. So everybody in agreement with how to move forward. Now we know that that's not always going to work. It'd be a beautiful thing if it could, but we know it doesn't always work. And so we really are committed to having deep conversation with each other, aiming for understanding, aiming for what's possible, what's feasible, moving from a place of asking questions before we try to make quick decisions. And if we aren't able to come to consensus, we then turn to a modified consensus model. And this is true throughout our ownership classes. And for us, in most cases, it looks like a majority, super majority. So we're looking at more like 75% are in agreement, as opposed to just a simple majority at 51% or something like that. Yes, so I just wanted to name that as part of how we are committed to making decisions. And one of the things you'll see today, or you won't see today, but you'll see in the future, is we're developing our decision-making matrix, which really allows us to define what are the areas that certain ownership classes need to have a say in, and seek consensus about before moving forward.
Thank you, Cache and Trenda. I'll speak a little bit about the community owners, which is kind of our least fleshed out component at this point, where the worker owners make a lot of decisions about the workplace, and the resident owners make a lot of decisions about the places that they are leasing or residing. The community owners are really making decisions about how the co-op is moving forward. They're making decisions around membership, acquisitions, new project directions, and whatever member benefits there may be. There will be 3 community owners elected to the board. I think that's what our bylaws state at this point. And they will be elected amongst themselves to participate equally in decision making for the co-op as a whole.
Perfect. Thank you, Sana. Yes, and then there's the worker owners, right? And so I think a huge component for us is, and this will trickle, I think, throughout the co-op, is really recognizing each of the key skill sets that each of us is bringing, engaging in those conversations so that we can actually deeply know each other, and uplift us in those skill sets so that it best serves the cooperative. I said the piece around the consensus model already, but we're excited to be finalizing / teasing out what the pathway to ownership looks like for each of those membership categories. I'm going to shift over to another little slide deck. And forgive me, I'm horrible at keeping time. So if there's any, thank you, Omar. 7 minutes left. Amazing. Maybe, would it be possible for us to email out some things after this? Okay, amazing. So I'm going to skip the slideshow so that we can get to some of the like other juicy bits. Excuse me for just. Let's talk about the projects we have going on and where we're going to be in the future. What's the grand vision? So I can say that October of last year, we purchased our first official property, which is a food forest on 1/10 of an acre in Holyoke, Northampton. Oh no, Holyoke, Massachusetts, excuse me. And so there we've had 3 residents who have been stewarding that and being able to enjoy significantly reduced. Currently it's rent. We are in the like co-building and learning together around whether Willow Prec is a model they want to join us on. But they've been stewarding the food forest beautifully, getting that opportunity to hopefully have a little less stress around what that rent looks like, and that tangible reality of ownership in the horizon. We've learned a tremendous amount through being in this relationship with them, including, right, like how do we navigate the fears that come up around housing? Because housing is essential. And with Willow Prec being currently the owners, right, it does create a power dynamic, one that they're very familiar with. And even as we're working to undo a lot of that and not show up in those kinds of ways, it just exists. So one of the things that we've been talking about, and I will toss it back up to Sana and Cache momentarily, is how do we navigate the feelings and the histories that people have and the realities of our systems. Sana, did you want to speak on that a little bit? I think it's we took the notes under one of the challenges.
Yeah, I do. I think one of the challenges there has been navigating the way people think about wealth and abundance as personal or familial rather than communal. A lot of times we have this idea of generational wealth as holding like a slice of the pie for my family and my direct descendants. It's my money, my land. And I think capitalism in its current form has, in order to succeed, needed to devalue any motive other than those for personal gain. So things essential to sustain human life, such as the shared use of land, meaningful labor, and socially embedded personal identity, needed to be deprived of their social meaning and turned instead into commodities to supply the needs of our market system. So sometimes it feels difficult to shift these beliefs towards a view of the accumulation of wealth as a social good. rather than any private end, to see shared assets and land as a collective contingency against future hardships, and to prevent like the situation that we see ourselves in now, where rents are too high for the people in communities to afford, and we're being priced out of our neighborhoods. So looking at the future and how to prevent something like this from happening again to our descendants, and to recognize that this is actually a basic responsibility of ours to provide for future generations in this way. We often hear people talk about decolonizing. Cachet uses the term re-indigenizing, which I really love and have been adopting for myself. And I believe our model has the potential to participate and move this bigger work forward. But I think it's challenging to sell the us versus we model, even within myself, because we are working. Even the terms that we're using while we talk about this are words like owning, possessing land, acquiring things. And this is somewhat problematic as we envision and work towards a world in which we all own it, which means no one owns it and it belongs to all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I recognize that we only have like probably 90 seconds left before we go into questions, but I really want to put a pin in this because hopefully it'll come back with the policy question of like what are some policy shifts and changes that could happen to help this, because I think one of the very important conversations that needs to be had is what is the relationship that we actually want to have as we build the Black economy, rebuild the Black economy through Black cooperatives. What is the relationship that we actually want to have with institutions and systems, particularly as we know them? I see a question in the chat box of, is there some other form of capitalism that can work? And I think the easy answer to that is there is no other form of capitalism, right? That there's capitalism and then there's things other than capitalism. And we've seen that capitalism does not work. So it's actually to divest, decolonize from the ideology of capitalism and individuality that actually is not nature to us as the diaspora. That is something that we were taught and forced into, and we have to re-force ourselves back into our nature, which is collectivism. So I just want to put a pin in that as I see the time. And hopefully we come back to that policy piece because I got a lot on that for you.
I'm a hitch in here. Yeah, absolutely. So just thank you for that initial sort of provocation that we've entered into, and you have touched upon a few of the things that we had kind of seeded as like initial questions to think about in the presentation. So I am going to maybe start with this question around impact. So what do you think have been the current impacts of the Willow Prec model on your community? Are you seeing people becoming more curious about these models? You've mentioned the food forest that you've engaged as this first property. Is there curiosity that seems to be developing and blooming for people to engage in this particular model?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think definitely there is a lot of interest over the last year, and for a few years now, Trenda has been having multiple conversations, and I think for all of us, it is in all of our conversations in one way or another. And people are definitely starting to think a little bit differently about how to address this housing crisis. To think about it as a systemic issue rather than just how do we get people into houses now, but how do we change the system so that in the future people aren't in the same position. And people are thinking about Willow Prec when different projects and opportunities come up. An example of that is there's been more than one person who's asked about donating their homes to Willow Prek, or how to leave Willow Prek, how to leave their property to Willow Prek after they pass. We're building deep relationships and networks with people and organizations that are going to eventually help us move this mission forward, and to kind of explode the co-op movement in general, which is something that we're really excited about. I think one of the direct impacts is of the 2 properties that Willow Prek are working with now. A total of 8 people have been housed, and more than 25 people have had access to retreat and healing space. So that's an impact that we're pretty proud of. And I think the impact on us, on individuals, is something that's hard to quantify. I know 2 of us have become cooperators just because Trenda has introduced this idea to us. And that's completely changed my life. And just as far as work goes, I am now employed full-time doing work that I really, really care about, and that I believe has the power to really leave a legacy, to impact my descendants and the people who will live in my community long after I'm gone. And that feeling of belonging to a movement is incredible. It's indescribable, and I'm really grateful.
Absolutely. And so then I'm then curious about, so we've heard, in fact, you, Sonaj, have just shared about like the transformation of yourself into a cooperator. I'd actually love to invite Cache into that question too. Were you engaged in cooperatives before you engaged in Willow Prek, or were you just, where were you in the cooperative ecosystem?
So this is a really interesting question for me to answer, which the more any of you get to know me, you'll know that's a common theme. Because what I would say is cooperatives, as in the language that we are speaking now, no. Trenda was talking to me about cooperatives for about 2 years before something clicked. But I will tell you what clicked for me was, oh, this is work I've been doing all my life. It's just being called something different, which is not something uncommon that we hear as colonized populations, right? This idea that colonizers came in, told you everything you were doing was wrong. Here's a new system of doing it. And now they're coming back saying, actually, our ancestors were wrong. You were right. We're going to give you back your own indigenous tools and call it something different and say we discovered it, right? So that's not an uncommon thing. And that's my experience of cooperatives. So what I will say is that coming to the cooperative movement as it is now, as I am now, and calling myself a cooperative developer, which, by the way, that's also some terminology that, is complicated, has only been about the last couple of years. But I believe that everything that I have done in my life, every program, every organization I've started, every class I've taught, anything, that it has all been with what we are now calling cooperative values. And if I may extend that a little bit, because someone asked, I'm really bad about, I know somebody is getting these questions too, but as they're sparking things, I want to make sure I address them, because the question about initial dialogues and relationships with tribes, I think, is important. I personally lived in Hawaii before I came back to my home of Philly for 6 years, and working, it's not tribal, but working with Polynesian indigenous populations, you also recognize they are already doing all of this. They just don't call it cooperatives. They just don't have an LCC. They don't have a C Corp, right? And so for me, it's how do I take that information into indigenous communities and Black communities and say, these are the master's tools that we have to use to crack this code before we create the new system, so that we don't even have to deal with these systems. So that was a long way of saying it took me about 2 years to come to this, and I've now been in it for about 2 years.
That's all right. There was an initial question, so maybe I'll ask you about the challenges, and recognizing that there's early stage here. There's this first property. I've heard the discovery of this idea, the engagement of other folks inside of this vision together. What are the primary challenges that you all have seen facing your efforts? And I'll even combine it with a question that was asked earlier, which was like, if you got a personal challenge, like I heard there was like a little bit of nugget of like trying to decolonize folks' relationship with money, or just kind of engage with how folks think about wealth. But what do you see as the primary challenges of the work that you are doing?
I will say, first, it really feels like the needing to find the balance between addressing the very real and very urgent needs of safe and affordable housing access. It is here, it has been here, and I think that there are times where, I mean, full transparency, right? Like Willow Prec was born out of urgent housing needs. And so because of that, there has been an effort to address those urgent needs. But what that can do sometimes is it pushes to the back burner some of the deep kind of structural work that also needs to be done when developing a whole cooperative system. Really, there are ways that those masters tools, right, come back to get you, because you're like, oh, I didn't think about how taxes worked in all this when we were addressing those critical housing needs, right? Or we didn't think about like how much undoing would need to be done to say yes to this kind of model, or to trust, right, that as technical landlords, because the system is limited currently, right, how legally we have to do certain things and show up in certain ways that is not really in alignment with what we're trying to do. And so I know that I have kind of a constant like heartbreak about that. The other piece is that we're still buying stolen land from people that, like it's a legacy of stolen land. And so while we're purchasing it and working to do something different with it, that is what we are doing. And on a personal level, in order to like understand how to participate in that thing, right? The purchasing part, I got my real estate license so I could learn deeply and lead that part of the effort, which is exciting because people are really excited about me as a realtor, talking with them about how complicated this is, right? However, it can be all consuming. And so I've been really excited to be peeling that work back, because capitalism will try to get you. Having needs met, right, is the key. And so when there's something that does that, it can be easy to suck you into it. So it's felt much more in alignment with my spirit to come back to and be in why I learned that. And that's Willow Prec. I'll pause there.
I'm curious on that note of navigating the sort of legal constraints, the structural constraints. I myself work in a 501c3, so each day I know that like you have to, every time you take on a new advisor, either in sort of the legal space or the finance space, you have to retrain them because like they're not plugged into this. So maybe I'll pitch a question over to you, Sana. I know that you are sitting in this seat of Director of Finance and Operations. I'm wondering sort of how you've had to maybe pivot on your training to support like helping this vision fit within these boxes that are available to it. So if you've had any feedback, and maybe this is like guidance and offering that you can give to people who are trying to train their own operations team to be rooted in this liberatory vision that Cachet has spoken about.
I think this is a part of the refinement that we're in. We are figuring out the impacts of moving at the speed of need rather than having the structures and forms in place before we do that. So part of what we're doing now is trying to figure out what structure makes the most sense so that we can hold on to of what we are stewarding, whether that be the donations of our community members, the donations of the people looking to redistribute their wealth, or people looking to donate properties. Those are financial resources. And when those financial resources come into our ownership or our stewardship, we want to make sure that we are able to leverage as much of that as possible. And I think because the PREC model is so new, and that we are doing it slightly different than the model that we are modeling ourselves after, that we are building and creating systems that have never been in place before. And that's kind of where I am. There's not a whole lot I can say as far as like new processes and structures, but they're in development. We are working with accountants and attorneys to create those. And it looks like Trenda might have something to add.
Yeah, because I think, co-ops in general, I think are often in the position where they're having to train their attorneys and train their accountants. And I think we are no different in that. I think what makes it more layered, particularly, is real estate is a funny business. Especially when you want to be really clear about who you are centering in real estate, because you're also navigating fair housing laws, right? It also requires it's the like labor attorneys and thinking about like the worker ownership component. There's also the, oh gosh, I'm gonna forget the, as we start to think about working with investors, what do they call those, the people when you have shares,
Stockholders?
yeah, there's a whole nother realm of law, consumer law, like there's consumer law. So we're really asking so much of our attorneys and our accountants, and kind of really pushing them to meet our vision, right? To figure out how to make our vision work within those confines, as opposed to what has been happening the last couple years, which is like, oh, you should just be a 501c3, or you should just be a community land trust, because those are some of the more familiar models. But really, to have folks, and we have them now, thank goodness, folks who are really invested in hearing us, dreaming with us, scheming with us, and strategizing with us.
And I'll add really quick to that I think this is where like all of the things I was talking about kind of converge, because you need people who know and understand local policy, right? There's local, like city, township, depending on where you are. You might have some other things. There's state, and then there's national. I think for me, the investment in national law, that's somebody else's domain. But I think that all cooperatives should have some sort of understanding of policies, laws in your locale, so that you know what you can and cannot work within. I'm also a fan of attorneys, I don't know who's on here, but attorneys and accountants who find loopholes, because the benefit of building something that has never been done is that there's often not policy written on it yet. You're putting things together. You're finding what can you do over here that you can bring over here. And so before everything is found out, we should kind of get in where we fit in. And yeah, no, I'll leave it there because I'm looking at time. So go ahead.
No, it's good. We, I got an eye on it. So I want to ask, so you were actually going there to that next question, which is about the policies that you need, right? So there are policies that you have, and you got to find loopholes through, but there are the policies that you need that would benefit you. And maybe you can also speak about if there are any relationships you all have developed in the co-op ecosystem of Massachusetts. I know I was just in Richmond for the Resist and Build Summit in Virginia, and they were talking about, the MassN, the Massachusetts Solidarity Economy Network. So there are other, co-op, things like that that are present in Massachusetts. I'm wondering, what is the sort of policy environment that you need, that you're trying to create or fighting for? And then also maybe what is the co-op ecosystem that may be supporting you?
This is a great question. So I'll talk a little bit about policy, and then I'll pass it over to Sana and Trenda to talk about some of the connections that have been happening, because there's a lot of those. The way I approach the policy question is that, there's kind of like what we should be looking at in general as cooperatives, particularly building your sustainable economy. So thinking about enabling legislation, so finding a way, as I said, for locals to provide more, for locales to provide more inclusive frameworks for how co-ops can actually operate effectively and be culturally relevant. So I will throw in right here, we just came back from Co-op Cincy Symposium. If any of you are familiar with the Co-op Cincy, yeah, out of Cincinnati, great symposium. I'd recommend going next year if you get an opportunity. And we got the opportunity to hear from a couple of folks who have been to Madrigal. So I'm not sure if folks are familiar with the Madrigal Corporation in Madrigal, Spain, which has over the last 50 years transformed the economy there, right? They have the lowest rate of poverty in the surrounding areas. But one of the things that they did for this to happen was they institutionalized cooperatives. And this is where it gets tricky, because that's Spain. It's the EU. It's also they just do not have the institutional and systemic history that we do here, so when we think about creating policy and like how can things be culturally relevant, this was one of the pieces that came up. So what I really want to do is like look at that model, right? And how is it a way to be culturally applied to areas here, be they urban, rural, whatever. And that policy piece is huge there, because they institutionalized their cooperative movement. What they say now is that they've built an economy where the government is working for the people instead of the people working for the government. Now it works in Madrigal. Sound great. Would love to do it here. Don't know that's going to happen. So what can we do instead? And so then there's like eligibility and regulation. So expanding programs to be inclusive of cooperatives. Then there's the finance part. So policies need to be reflective of local and state funding, support for cooperatives. There should also be just in general an ease of in policy for businesses to sell to their workers, because as you all know, that's one of the more common ways for worker co-ops to come into existence. And then of course there's some social mandates, or at least regulations, that should be considered. So like clear allowance of contracted processes of cooperatives without extorting folks and cooperatives. And then some of I already talked about the institutional challenges, so I don't need to talk about that anymore. But those are some of the big policy pieces that not only is Willow Prec looking at, but that we think other cooperatives should always be looking into. We also, and then I'll pass it, we also think it's really important as a permanent real estate cooperative to be engaged with tenant unions. Now, how involved is up to you, but we just think that it's important that they understand that we're on their side and that we're fighting for the same thing that they're fighting for. Often tenant unions will see cooperatives come in and, or, cooperative developers, and they're taken advantage of valid concerns. And so we want to make sure that that piece is in place. So I'll pass it to Trenda and Sana to talk a little bit more about the community connections.
I will say I feel really, really excited to live where I live. Western Massachusetts is rich with co-ops. There's so many co-ops in our area, and not just co-ops, right? Lots of folks who are working on community land trusts, lots of folks who are interested in cooperative housing, mostly in the hey, I got a crew of my people, we want to buy together, or we want to steward land together. I feel like I'm so excited to be starting in Western Mass, where I've been for almost 20 years. Oh, gosh, wild to say, but almost 20 years at this point, because I feel like in our community, folks are ready, and are looking for the shape that can really kind of hold and support our whole network and coming together. So I'm seeing more and more of that happening in Western Massachusetts now, where I think there's like 3 or 4 official community land trust groups in the area, and there are like who knows how many other individuals and small collectives that are looking to be in conversation. And so Willow Prec is deep in those conversations with folks, and we're looking to get even deeper into those conversations now that we're like, okay, we ran for a while. We made some things happen real quick for a while. That was great. Let's really slow down, re-anchor in, because we know we can't do this without community, don't want to do this without community. And so as we think about, there's a reason to our willow tree, right? Really recognizing the depths of roots and the widespreadness of a willow tree, but also all of the branches, right? We hope that Willow Prec will be a place where community members, community owners, resident owners, and worker owners can access things like membership at the food co-op, membership at the childcare co-op, membership at the credit union. And so this next year of refinement is really going to be about strengthening those connections and hopefully, formalizing some partnerships so that when we talk about those member benefits, that is all a part of it. So that's kind of how we're thinking about the cooperative network. I just saw you pop in. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, Dorian. We are in a network of, the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, the Cooperative Development Institute, right? I know that these are not just Western Mass based, but right, we see them showing up in community and for us and for other co-ops. So I'll pause.
Yeah, and so I want to land a little bit then, just of course, Collective Diaspora is here seeking to build a network of Black cooperators across the diaspora, regardless of what regional parlance they use for their form of cooperation. Certainly up in Canada, when we had the bankers ladies here, nobody was necessarily thinking about the Roscas as a cooperative, but there are ways that they are interlinked with the cooperative ecosystem and network. So just want to, I'll pose the question, do you all see value in such a network? And I also want to give you all space to land any calls for action that you want to pepper out there to folks in the world. So
A value in a Black cooperator network?
yes.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Is there anyone who doesn't find value? I I think, I mean, and I will say in this answer, I'm going to represent just myself individually because I recognize the potential, but I think that it is important that the Black solidarity economy recognizes the impact of not having our own economy, and that we return to a sense of that. We're in a time right now, and I don't want to get too far off, where folks are pulling out of banks, right? Like big institutions. Like, we don't know what's going to happen in the next, year to 5 years in this world. And I think that establishing an economy for us, by us, that is built on many of the practices and ideologies that the diaspora had prior to the transatlantic slave trade crises, and that sustained us during, and that brought us through the eras of Jim Crow. I think it's imperative that we return to some of those practices so that we survive. And not only survive, but thrive. Because I think another thing, and I want to bring this back in, that Trenda mentioned early on tonight, is what does it look like even for us to establish a rest economy, right? So what are those things looking at? And Trenda has an incredible idea that she also came up with at Co-op Sensi. If she would like to share or not, I'm not sure. But and I think these are some things that are really important. So absolutely. We also use another term, and then I'll stop talking, that resource mobilizing, and how resource mobilizing is so much more than just mobilizing finances, that we have enough in our communities for a trade economy. And though we are not there yet, that is something we can work towards, right? So bringing in, again, the capitalism question earlier with the things we've talked about, like, how do we make all of the things work together so that they work for us? And I think that nothing is greater than a Black solidarity, anything. That's just my personal opinion. So.
All right. I see you, Trenda. You got another thread on there?
Well, I want to honor that there are some questions, but I want to just echo that absolutely, part of my dream for WillowPrec is that WillowPrec is able to be a part of an international network anchored in housing, commercial space, and space for retreat. One of the houses that we're about to take over full stewardship of, maintains a space open just for that, for people to come and rest. Like, we need breaks. And I want also community, I want us all and community and our economy to be in full support of that. Like, invest in our rest. Oh, that's a phrase. Invest in our rest. Yeah, that.
Invest in our rest. Sana, I want to give you space to say a final word if you want to throw it in there. And then I want to tell people where they can find you.
I echo and co-sign what my co-operators just said. Definitely into a network, and think that there is great value in us creating one. And thank you for the work that you're doing around this, and having us here to participate.
All right. And this has been WillowPrec telling you to invest in our rest. And you can visit them at willowprec.com. Go to their website. If you didn't get a question answered tonight, time is, the beast of us all, right? Just kind of holding these boundaries and these containers. It's both, ethereal and mysterious and a construct, but also it's real. So we are about to get out of here in a moment, but willowprec.com, check out willowprec. You can follow them. It looks like this little IG icon on there. There's a contribute button on there. So it looks like you can still give to them somehow. And you can give through their fiscal sponsor, Rise for Social Justice. There's a bunch of ways that you can make sure that you can funnel resources in their direction and also follow what they are doing. We are Collective Diaspora, and we are here to spotlight and think about and share and showcase Black cooperatives. And I'm looking for a slide while I'm talking because there's transparent facilitation. If you want to check us out, all of these interviews that you've experienced are available on our YouTube channel. So you can go ahead and follow Collective Diaspora. You may be able to scan that QR code and give to Collective Diaspora. You can certainly join membership of Collective Diaspora, and all of the support that you give to Collective Diaspora goes to us being able to help incubate, build this network internationally of cooperators in the Caribbean, in Canada, in Africa, in the US. We want to make sure that we connect these networks, share our resources, tell our stories, share our challenges, and hopefully, make all of our cooperatives stronger. Boom, there we go. Diaspora.coop/donations will also get you there if you don't scan the QR code tonight. And with that, I'm looking for a concluding song. So yeah, I said all the ways we could reach out, so you know that. But what's the song we got to go out? IKYK by Ogie. It'll come on in a moment. But with that, we are jamming, and we are Collective Diaspora here for the Black cooperators around the world. And if the song doesn't come on, then Trenda will have to give us a meditation so that we can rest. Because I heard that apparently you jammed it up at Co-op Sensi, and I wasn't there, and I wanted to be.
Well, so they're not doing another one next year, but the year after that, I know we're trying to go back. I don't know that we name dropped the National Association of Black Cooperatives or Cooperators. Came across that. That was amazing to hear.
Yes, they do. Thank you, Trenda. They actually have a National Association for Black Cooperators conference happening in Washington, D.C., November 3rd through the 5th. There is a multi-level payment options, including one for free on there. So it's on Eventbrite, and if you Google, I think it'll come up, because I'm not sure their website is up yet, but thank you for remembering that, Trenda.
Mm-hmm.
All for coming. Great night. That was beautiful.
This is a burden to share. Why would you go alone and hide what is going on? Don't do this on your own, 'cause I've been here all alone. Say, I know you know that I'll be there whenever you need me. Oh, come on, we got some work to do. This could take us a